the School Board, Osceola County School Board Workshop for the impact fee update for Tuesday, June 15th to order. Educational impact fees. Are you Carson Vice?
I am.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you since Deborah's not here. You're on.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Carson Vice with Tischler Vice. If you recall, we met, I believe it was in January or early February, where I briefed you on sort of an overview of the process. And I'm here today to sort of walk you through the draft educational facility impact fee study, the level of service standards, the cost assumptions, and answer any questions that you may have about the study and the data that went into it. So, sort of the first step of the impact fee study is to document your current demand indicators, and in this case, those are student generation rates, or the number of public school students generated by different types of housing units. So this first slide here summarizes those county-wide student generation rates. You'll note here that there are 6 different land use categories. We have single-family housing units, townhomes, multifamily units, condominium units, mobile home units, and then a new category that wasn't in the last impact fee study, which is called the studio one-bedroom apartment. And so these student generation rates are based on geocoded data provided by the school and district staff, where we match up the number of school-age or school children that go into Osceola County schools to these different land use types. And so we see the student generation rates here highlighted in green. In all cases, you will note that the student generation rates are going down slightly. And overall, when you look at the universe of students versus the universe of housing units, that percentage change is about 11%. That's not unusual given what we're seeing elsewhere in the country. It follows certain demographic trends that probably most of you are aware of, where people are waiting longer to have children. Our birth rate is the lowest it's been in almost 100 years. So this isn't surprising data. And another reason why it's you should be updating your impact fees every 3 to 5 years, which the district has been doing. And one of the reasons is to reflect these demographic changes. So we also looked at student generation rates for the short-term rental units. As you are aware, the county is very unusual relative to most counties in the country, given the tourism-related or seasonal nature of your population. And so there is an impact on schools from short-term rentals. And so we did the same type of analysis that was done as part of your last impact fee study, again using geocoded data. And again, 6 different land use categories, studio, one-bedroom apartment being a new category. And much like the county-wide numbers, these numbers are going down as well. Overall, it's a 13% change. As part of the analysis in the beginning, we also have to sort of tell a story. That story is that the school district has grown, that growth has generated the need for additional school capacity, that growth is going to continue into the future. And so in order to project future enrollment, we looked at the University of Florida's Bureau of Economic and Business Research, also known as BEBR, projections, and the median projections are what reflected what's currently or what's been the trends in the county and what's likely to happen in the future from our perspective. And so we looked at those types of housing units over the next 10 years and applied those pupil generation rates to those in order to project a future enrollment over the next 10 years of slightly over 15,000 new students, which is about a 29.5% increase. So now let's get into the actual factors that are being used in the calculations. And one of the benefits of working with stakeholders from various sectors of the economy, whether they're builders, business people, community advocates, et cetera, is that a lot of times they make you look at things in a different way. And one of the things that came out of our meetings with the Growth Management Task Force, that's the correct name, right? Yeah,
Yes.
from the subcommittee of the chamber, is that they ask us, well, what's the bottom line in terms of what's our level of service? Because we know what, from a transportation perspective, what level of service A means versus level of service D. So where are we as a school district in terms of our level of service? Because how we traditionally represent that from an impact fee perspective is, arriving at level of service standards in terms of we've got so much building area per student, or we've got so many acres per student. But what does that mean in terms of what we're providing as a district? And so we work with district staff, and they've got their own sort of measurements internally here, which you'll see in this color index here, where the green equals a preferred capacity at school levels, which is at 89.5% or less. Yellow is basically a warning sign that we're approaching capacity at 89.5% to 99.5%. And then red equals where we have exceeded maximum capacity, and we're, for lack of better terms, and I'm just going to put words in the school district's mouth, sort of an emergency situation. We need to relieve these capacity needs. And so when you look at it from that perspective, it sort of equalizes those levels of service standards that we come up with and are used in the impact fee calculation to give you a more sort of quantitative and qualitative look at where we are as a district. And you can see here, currently, the district is in their sort of preferred zone, where overall at the elementary, middle, and high school levels, when you look at it as a complete system, they are in the preferred capacity realm. That doesn't mean that there may not be individual schools that may exceed that may be in the yellow or the red, but overall as a district, we are in that sort of preferred capacity. And since we are under capacity in terms of enrollment versus permanent capacity in the schools themselves, we use the permanent capacity to determine the level of service standards. If we use the actual enrollment within the schools themselves, we would be representing a higher level of service, meaning that we built the schools that we operate at 100%, or we're built to operate at 100%. But if we're at 75%, we're charging new growth for a higher cost than what we've stated as a system that we're going to provide.
Help me understand the difference between
Sure.
enrollment and permanent capacity. I probably missed that at some point.
Yeah, so, and step in if I misspeak, staff. But permanent capacity, there's different measures of capacity. There's programmatic capacity from certain perspectives. But this basically is a measure of, based on the inventory of schoolhouses that the district submits to the state, is based on the footprint of the school, the types of buildings we have, the square footage we have. This is what we can maintain permanent capacity with before we have to provide portable classroom space.
So this does not include portables then?
This does not include portables.
So this
Thank you
is
for asking that question.
And we don't-
enrollment, oh, so
Go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
Enrollment, how many students we have, how many students we can house. That's the difference
Exactly.
between those two?
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly.
So we're not counting all of the students that are at charter schools at this point?
Right.
We cannot include charter schools in our impact fee study.
Okay, no, that's fine, I just want to understand what the baseline was there.
Now, does that include, like, because we had COVID, is those digital students as well?
It would include our digital students who are attached to their home zone school. It does not include students who are enrolled at Osceola Virtual School, because it's not brick and mortar. But the assumption is that our digital students are coming back into the building.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, because it looks like we're under capacity, but if they come back, then we're not.
Right. And I mean, I just, not the most attractive analogy, but the way to think of it is, when you look at a sewer system, right? You have peak demand. You have to provide the capacity within your wastewater system to meet that peak demand. The school system's no different. You may have 1,500 students that may be attending school virtually, but they could walk in the door tomorrow and demand a seat. So those seats have to be there for the students. So this next slide looks at planned capacity projects. It also gives the the grade level, you can see there's several K through 8, there's a K through 5, and then there's a high school reconfiguration. It also has the projected year that they would be open, and then the number of permanent capacity in terms of student seats that these would add. So the next step is we look at K through 8 enrollment versus planned capacity through the year 2026. So basically, that blue column there, or blue row, represents where your enrollment is when you add the elementary and middle school capacity versus enrollment. You can see that we're still in that preferred capacity range. We're at 80%. And so then we look at, well, what's the projected enrollment at those grade levels, which was from a previous slide we saw. And then we add in those planned capacity improvements from the previous slide. And you can see that if we do nothing at all, this is the bottom part of the slide, if we do nothing at all, if we build no planned capacity, the K through 8 enrollment versus capacity would be at 103%, so it would be in the red. When we add those planned permanent seats, it shows that as we go from the base year through school year 29-2030, we're still within that green with the additional permanent capacity. But, however, at the end of that 10-year period, we do then go into that yellow warning area where capacity exceeds 89.5%, so we'll be right back to where we started, where we need to start building capacity again. This slide here shows same sort of analysis, but at the high school level. So again, we look at your current enrollment versus permanent capacity. We're at 86% today. You may remember from 2 slides, we only have that high school reconfiguration. It's not a brand new high school. It's not a large classroom addition. It's only adding 171 additional permanent capacity stations. So you can see here that we are in the preferred capacity zone for the first 2 years. Then from school year 2022 to 2023, we are in the yellow, which is the warning area, up through school year 2026. And then in the last 5 years of the analysis, we would be in the warning area where capacity enrollment exceeds permanent capacity. In fact, it goes all the way up to 111% permanent capacity. So it's clear that after the initial 5 years, additional high school capacity is going to have to be identified. So we get into the cost components. One of the trickiest areas of an impact fee study is to hypothesize on what it's going to cost a school district to buy land in the future. And so we don't like to speculate and project into, look into a crystal ball and say, we guess an acre of land is going to be X amount of dollars 3 years from now. So what we like to do is look at past land purchases that have been over the last 3 to 5 years. And we're fortunate in this go round that there has been a land purchase in 2 parcels that are currently under contract that really represent a broad cross-section of the type of properties that the school district would have to buy, that they're representative of all areas of the county, and we've identified those as east, west, and central. So we have the Nova Road property, we have the Knightsbridge K through 8 site, and then we have the Kindred School site. All of these purchased within the current year. This shows the original cost, the number of acres. So we get a weighted cost per acre of about $90,699, which is about $10,700 more than what we used in the last study. And so we would expect that to go up. Yes?
We just had is Transportation West, is that allowed to be considered because it's not a school? But it was a purchase and it's on the west side of town, because you literally have east, west, and that was a more recent purchase as well.
It's ancillary, so we're only counting student stations.
But just out of curiosity, what was the cost per acre?
The appraisals are just coming in and we're verifying them, so I don't have, literally one came in today and one came in last Thursday, so I haven't thoroughly looked at both of them to see what the average, but I can tell you they both support the pricing contract. So they came in with
So about the six, no, what I'm saying is, I'm not looking at that as an individual thing, and I appreciate that, but I mean, like, compare it to that, is it within the 90,000? Because if it was added to the average, would it increase this average of like 90 to say 95, or is it below the 90?
But I don't think we want to add it because it's ancillary property.
Right.
No, I understand, but I'm talking about, land is still land, though, I mean, they can call it whatever they want, that's the true cost of land.
So the second appraisal just came in, so I've not looked at it for a price breaker. I just looked at it real quick and saw that the bottom line at least met the price we're looking at in the contract, so I can move forward with the due diligence.
Okay, yeah, you know what I'm saying, I know what you're saying, it's not ancillary, but it's still a large piece of land, and the reality is, you know, it's costs something.
So the next cost assumption is the cost of construction, and what we tried to do here is use recent projects that the district has constructed that utilize impact fee funds. So if I misspeak here, please correct me, but typically on reconfigurations, remodels, those kind of things, the school district hasn't used impact fee funds as the primary source of revenue. So we want to be reflective of how you actually use the revenue. So there were other projects that we could have put in here to get an average cost per square foot, but they wouldn't be the type of projects that the district typically uses impact fees for. Unfortunately, we didn't have a representative project for the elementary school, so we defaulted to the Department of Education construction cost data, which is from the most recent year, which was 2019, and that cost per square foot was $229.07. For middle school, we used the recent Harmony Middle School construction, which came in at about $216 a square foot. And then for high school, there were 4 different samples that we could use here, and we could get a weighted cost there of about $246 per square foot.
Don't you think that's a little bit conservative, though? I mean, this report was from January to December 2019, and labor and material costs have gone up, obviously, exponentially from during that period to now. So how much could we anticipate adding, you think, to that?
Or can we drop off 2017 and use more of a recent year, because that's lowering the average? Because right now, in full honesty, I spoke with Mr. Clench the other day about Gateway High School, because we were just doing the modification. And I talked to a couple other people too, and he was like, it's hard to even get anything less than 300 a square foot, 320 if you're lucky. And then I confirmed that with even other folks, and they kind of agreed. It's like less than 300 bucks a square foot you're not getting. So there's 2 outliers. Even Toho, 2018, that was a long time ago. We were to recreate Toho, I was told it'd be north of like $90, $100 million easily. And I actually sat down, because that was a heartache I had at the last school board meeting. And I was like, oh my God, it's, you know, 74 million, and I'm finding out that, darn it, that's just, that's really what
Leo City.
That was Gilbane Construction, and Little was the designer.
In Poinciana?
That was Song and Associates, the designer. Gordon Smith was the CM.
Now, I'm curious, and what's the state DOE average then? Because you used the elementary school because we didn't have it. How do we benchmark it off with it?
What year is that for, that DOE?
So the DOE, the most recent, actually, the new one just came out today, I think, or yesterday, so we haven't looked at that. It's obviously part of this presentation was already put together. They're always a few years behind.
Okay.
But that's common with any impact fee study. Whether we're talking about roads, parks, it's always a catch-up. And you know, you have to use the data that's available. And so anything else is speculative, right? And so you always tend to look at, well, what did we just pay to build, you know, Prospect Park? Or what did we pay to build Smith Parkway, right? What's the weighted cost? Knowing that you're always going to be slightly behind the 8 ball. That's just the nature of impact fees, right? But traditionally, the school district has built schools for less of a cost per square foot than the state average.
I'm just like, man, I hate using that 246 average, and I know you can't build anything for 246.
If we set impact fees based on this information, we know we're creating a problem.
Yeah, that's the issue I'm having. That's
Well, I'm just playing devil's advocate, you've probably been in that situation every time that you've adopted impact fees.
Not quite like this though, right? I mean, the historically speaking, the trends are far more consistent.
You are right that the cost of lumber and other things have gone up more dramatically the last year than
And of
probably since
labor.
Hurricane Katrina, right? You're correct on that note, but.
$95 for a sheet of plywood today when I was at
Right.
Home Depot.
Right, but basically every impact fee study you've adopted has been behind the eight ball, so to
Well,
speak.
let me ask you, can you take it, because I'm
He's
speaking
locking
from,
us in now.
with my appraiser hat on, you know, we have used historical data, but then I also put in active data and active listings to give me kind of a benchmark of what, you know, what has sold and what's going to sell. You mentioned Gateway, I mean, I know there's gonna probably be change orders and everything, but that would be more of an accurate number than these numbers. Wouldn't
But
it be?
again, it's speculative.
I know it's speculative, but I mean, there's gotta be some kind of a formula.
And it's a statutory requirement, right? I mean, that's what the problem is using speculation puts us against what the statute says.
Well, the statute just says you have to use the most recent and localized data, right? That's what the statute says. You know, it would be helpful, you know, we may have a better leg to stand on, you know, if there was a school under construction right now that we could say, well, hey, it's $332 a square foot. How does that compare to what the DOE averages, right?
Well, we do have Gateway though. Gateway,
But
I think.
Gateway also, it hasn't occurred yet, and also it's a mix of renovation
Yeah,
and.
you got demos in there.
It's a comprehensive renovation.
So it's
And we
not
can't use a GMP as the data. We can't use like a current GMP as the data,
What do you mean by GMP?
a current proposal.
Oh,
So like if right now we contracted for X, we can't use that as our data?
well, I don't think you want to use one construction cost per square foot for each school level.
Right.
Because it's a different level of effort, it's a different footprint, different amenities, et cetera, with elementaries versus middle.
But if you got one that we know is good and accurate,
Increases
and
the
you make
average.
your assumptions up or down, let's say the one we got that's good to high school, we're making it up. We know that elementary school's 90%, or middle school's 90%, and elementary's 80% of that.
What I
So don't know
really,
what the
really
numbers are.
wouldn't wanna do
Make it-
is set this up and then we're gonna be upside down. I mean, if you lived in Osceola, you would know how touchy impact fees are, right? We actually have land here, right? People wanna build, and there's a lot of controversy between all the parties involved, right? So it's best that we get this right as opposed to acquiesce to a number that we know is gonna cause us it's so drastic, the change is so drastic that it's not like I mean,
That ain't 240 to 260, it's like
Yeah.
240
It's a $100 difference.
to
it's a 30% difference, yeah. I mean,
May I ask, you were talking about how the formula was built and you have to use localized data? Localized specifically to Osceola County, or can we use data from other counties around?
Orange County, for example.
Like Orange or, Volusia, cause they might have,
I would be hesitant to use Orange County construction costs for
Sure.
Osceola County, because they may have a different footprint, a different model prototype for
I understand.
schools.
However, would there be another county that is comparable to what Osceola is that we would be able to use?
Here's my perspective, is that most school impact fees default to the state cost.
Yeah.
Some exceed the state cost, but they use the state cost regardless, right? Because you have to build hurricane shelters and all of this kind of stuff. I mean, from our perspective, because we want to keep you out of court, right?
No, sure, I'm just asking like in the realm of possibilities,
Right.
I don't really know what is
I wouldn't
possible.
use Orange County as a proxy.
The numbers were off.
Right,
So if we're challenged in court.
Yeah.
They're gonna use the numbers
no,
that
perfect.
come right out of the county and we're
I
gonna
just
get.
wanna know what's possible, cause there
Right.
seems to be a little heartache with using
It
these
is.
numbers, so I'm trying to figure out how to.
Well, how far can we drop off? Like, can we drop off 2017, at least get rid of the high school addition there? Because we have two Poincianas, you know what I'm saying? So 2017 sounds like a far range to go 4 years in the future. What does the statute say about that?
The statute doesn't address that. But typically what we do is we look at, what construction has happened since then. I mean, we could, as an option, we could apply, engineering, news and record, inflation factors to 2017, 2018, 2019.
Can you just delete it altogether though, like in statistic? I mean, it's 2000, that's too far back.
From my
Why
perspective,
even when you're going back to 17, was like 16 the last year the impact fee was, and then we're using 17 as a new number?
yeah,
Is that one?
Because our it's.
yeah, because the other thing is you don't want to be accused of cherry picking,
Okay.
which is what
Okay, I
we're
didn't
talking
realize,
about.
I'm just.
Yeah.
Right? So you want to have just like the land, you want a broad cross-section because it's $317 every time you build a school. There are different things that happen. There are contingencies that you may not have planned for in one school versus another. So you want to have a broad cross-section. So, I mean, one option could be, we could inflate those numbers based on ENR inflation factors and see what that does. But one of the reasons, you may also note that the Neo City Academy is on the high side, right? So it sort of balances it out. Because, the $382 a square foot is much, much higher than the DOE average for high schools.
That's what you're saying.
And at the end of the day, I mean, I think that what you would find is if we adjusted this to, let's just say it came out to $260 a square foot, it makes $200 difference in the impact.
Now, here's the other thing, you said middle school, do we have any Ks that we built?
No.
So everything, we haven't built
We have
anything in the
three
last,
that are coming, but not as of yet.
so everything's just been remodels then?
We don't
Yes,
use
comprehensive
it.
renovations.
No, I understand what I'm saying, but I'm just thinking in my head, because there's been a lot of activity, but all the like Denjon Middle School was a remodel.
Renovation.
Yeah, it's a comprehensive, it's like literally a brand new school. And there's things that you can't use it, because I know it's a remodel, but it's like,
There were existing buildings that we retained and renovated, so that would skew the numbers.
All right, I got a question. And this is a dumb question, how did you arrive at 246 based on these numbers? Yeah, but I'm averaging it, it's 283.
It's weighted though.
17, 231, 382.
I've done it every which way, if y'all look at it differently.
ooh, you got it.
217 plus 232 plus 382 plus 303 divided by 4.
Is it by student stations, that average?
He's coming up with 283.
No, it's the number of square feet times the cost of construction, or divided by, it's the cost of construction divided by 450.
The gross
So
square
it's
feet.
450, I think, divided by that, or 110 divided by that.
And my apologies, I was just dividing those, I was assuming you were taking the cost per square foot and
Let's just use Robert's number.
It's a weighted average.
It's a weighted average based on the size.
Now, you had me panic there for a second.
well, I was adding.
We were all happy.
I didn't know, it says high school average, so I said, well, I bumped out the middle school and it still was it. Okay.
Whew.
Your math is right.
Disaster
Although
alert.
we were just talking about math skills.
So, I mean, maybe we should continue on, and then if we
Yes.
want to revisit this slide, we can, do that as we go forward. So the next cost component is for your yellow fleet or the school buses. We have a current inventory of 391 buses, and the average replacement cost is about $137,500. And so when we look at your current enrollment versus the bus fleet, we get our level of service standard, and then we have an average cost of $137,688. Then you've also got what's also referred to as the white fleet, which is your non-bus inventory. And you've got 341 units there. Total value is about 13.9 million, which equals an average cost of 40,978. Compare that to the enrollment, we get our level of service standard. And the district would like to address new transportation facilities over the next 10 years. So there's a component in the impact fee. So they can generate money to buy land and build square footage to enhance the transportation facilities. So this slide basically shows your current level of service in terms of your 3 facilities now, in terms of permanent buildings space. There are some portable units, I think at the Horizon Middle School Satellite Transportation Center. So we get our level of service standards there for acres and square footage. We're using cost of $91,500 for cost per acre, and then the cost per square foot is $215, which is based on the Florida DOE average cost for non-classroom buildings. So if you remember from our last meeting, we talked about the need for credits within the impact fee methodology. So the idea behind credits is that if someone pulls a building permit and pays you an impact fee for school facilities, we have to guard against the chance of them paying again or paying twice through another form of revenue, whether it's sales tax or debt service on existing bonds, et cetera. And so we analyze how the school district pays for capacity, and that has been primarily through issuances of certificates of participation, also known as COPs. So we've got a summary of all the different certificates that are on issue now. That total principal is about $127.9 million. And we've basically gotten a net present value credit per student based on projected enrollment. The net present value discount rate is based on the interest rate on each of those certificates, okay? So we get a total credit of $1,712. So when we move to the next slide, this is for the county-wide fee structure. This table here on the left side basically summarizes all these level of service standards and cost factors that you've seen in the previous slides. So we get that total gross capital cost per acre, or excuse me, gross capital cost per student down at the first green line. So you can see here at the elementary level, it's $31,634. It's $31,894 for middle school and $37,102 for high school. And from that, we deduct those different credits for each of the certificates of participation. So we get a net local capital cost per student. So for elementary, it's $29,921, elementary $31,801, and then $35,389 for high school. On the right side of the slide, you see those student generation rates we talked about from the first slide. And so we basically run those apply those student generation rates against that net local capital cost per student at these different grade levels in order to get the countywide fees. As you can see here, the proposed fee for single family represents a $28 increase over your current fee. The townhome is essentially a break-even proposition. It's the same amount. The multifamily fee goes down $125. The condominium fee goes up $90, and the mobile home fee goes up $394. And then that new land use type we have, the studio one-bedroom apartment, is $327, and you're currently charging $0 at this point. So then we move on to the short-term rentals. Same table, basically.
Well, we haven't been charging $0, we've been charging.
Well, they've been playing.
Clarify that.
They've been playing multifamily,
It's
right?
multifamily right now.
Right,
yes.
so it's going from $11,000 to
Yes.
$327.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify.
It's actually going down.
Yeah.
And how do you, what is one of these things? If this is, I kind of understand this, if it's the market rate, studios are gonna build next to the hospital for medical type staff, as being like this. If you're gonna talk about a hotel out on the other side of 192, where they're gonna put families in there and convert little hotel rooms into this, I don't buy it at all, because we know they're full of kids. So are those two the same thing in this calculation, or are they different?
And does a conversion avoid impact fee altogether? Because sometimes they're like, hey, wait a second, you're not building a new station, you're converting it from a hotel where students are already living. And hopefully they don't play that game and don't give us anything at all.
Right, so all of these are issues that we heard from the stakeholders that we're gonna talk about, I think maybe on the next slide, actually.
Okay, never mind, sorry.
But they're all good comments, and it all gets, the devil's in the details, as they say, right? And a lot of it gets to how you define these units within the implementing ordinance that the county ultimately adopts. But to answer your question, I believe it was, if you took a hotel and then converted that into an apartment building, they would not be exempt from the impact fee under most impact fee ordinances.
So it'd be a change of use.
Right, it's a change of
It's a
use,
change of use
right,
from commercial to residential.
right, right. But, I mean, your concerns are justified, right? Because we saw this, you know, in the early 2000s when, you know, everybody was starting to do fees by bedrooms. All of a sudden, dens became, you know, bedrooms became dens, right? Because they didn't have a bathroom, and then you get a CO, and the next thing you know, it's a bedroom, right? So you gotta be careful how you define these, because you gotta think about all the different scenarios in terms of how you could game the system and not be made whole, right? So,
Well, and like I had mentioned at our last meeting about the multi-generational floor plans, are almost a quasi duplex, but because they have, it's another, but I know it serves a
Right.
different
Yeah, yeah.
purpose. It serves a purpose for a mother-in-law or extended
Right.
family.
Yeah, I'm just gonna give you my take on it, and again, it's just my take, right? Somebody else may have a completely different perspective on this. Typically, when somebody says a studio, one bedroom, it's sort of a new type of unit we're seeing nationwide. It typically is in a very urbanized area, close to transit. It's more usually a high-rise unit versus a studio or garden apartment type unit. And it really is geared toward a particular demographic. However, in a suburban setting, you have to be that much more cautious in terms of how you define it, because I think there are more opportunities to get around what the original intent is. Because I live in the DC area, and we do a lot of work in Boston right now on doing fiscal and economic work on just these types of units where you see it. I mean, it's young urban professionals, it's one person, they may get married, right? Then they buy their house that they end up having kids in.
But they're professional and they're
Right.
higher end.
Right.
That's the difference, it's the socioeconomic
Right,
clientele.
exactly right, exactly.
Is there a housing type in code or in statute or wherever we find these things, forgive my ignorance, for a studio one bedroom? I know that was one of the things that we had to be very careful of last time when we were differentiating between townhouse, multifamily, and condo, is that those are specific housing types.
So the research that we've been doing to try to prepare for this is, the apartment is still a multifamily, so what would become important is in the definition, you assign a size. So from what I could tell, and then Carson disagrees with what you've been finding, studio apartments, so no bedroom, just an open room, they're running anywhere from 300 to 600 square feet. One bedroom is literally that, the bedroom is its own room, separated from everything else. Those can actually start running anywhere from 600 to 1,100 square feet. So the key in the definition is being very specific about size and the physical characteristics, because otherwise in the land code, they're just another multifamily apartment. So we need to be so I needed to ask Frank if it's going to create an application like we do for the villas and the short-term rentals and the HOPA, where somebody comes in and says, but where I get a little concerned is, when we spoke to the developers, nobody was gonna build a whole complex of one bedroom or studios. So in an apartment complex, you have 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, and a handful of studios. So every apartment complex could have 10 to 20 of these, and then the balance of their complex would be 2, 3, 4 bedrooms. But nobody's just gonna go out and build an entire complex of just this type of unit. So it's gonna get a little.
That's what they were talking about doing there.
I think that's coming, yeah.
We're seeing,
It'd make it easier for tracking purposes.
we're seeing a lot of responsible developers, but we're also seeing those who are trying to game the system.
Stick marks or everything.
Let me tell you what they'll do. I think you mentioned you said upwards to 1,100 square feet. 1,100 square feet.
For one bedroom.
I know, for one bedroom.
That's big.
They like to use the word flex room.
Yeah.
Flex. So I carve out a room and it's a flex room. So it's a one bedroom with a flex. That flex is another bedroom.
It's a
All you gotta do is just put another wall up and it's a bedroom.
Or they use a partial wall.
That's what I mean. Yeah, or a partial wall, yeah.
I was in New York City this weekend, eating a Little Italy, and all these female students were standing next to the table. I said to the waiter, who are all these people? He said, that apartment's for rent. I said, what? So I said to the girl, how much they want? He says, $2,500 a month. I said, that's a lot. 800 square feet. There were 4 girls who were gonna live together.
So I did some quick research today on apartments. So Kissimmee doesn't register as one of the top 100 cities that they're monitoring. But for Orlando, the average apartment is 949 square feet. The studio apartment average is 500, and its one bedroom is running about 721 square feet. So I did Orlando, Tampa, Tallahassee, Gainesville. They're all in the 900s as an average. And then all of their studios are running from 376 to 500, and their one bedrooms are running 670 to 721. So that's considered the average for Florida for these types of units for us maybe to start looking at when we want to build our definition on what the.
So would it be easier to, instead of saying studio and one bedroom,
It's
just
two
have a
different things.
studio category?
It's definitely two very different
Because
items.
then you could do that less than 600 square feet. I mean, Carson, you're this, and it's up to these are the board's decisions to make, because those are governance decisions. I'm just throwing that out there.
Even the previous study.
1,100 square feet scares me to death.
That, yeah, that's an easy, I mean, villas and.
they'll have 4
houses
kids
are
in
running
There's some 3-bedroom homes that are 1,100 square foot,
Yeah.
Sam.
Unfortunately, yeah.
My mountain cabin's 700. And it's two, I mean, you could,
I
full,
just-
full
I'm
2
just-
bedrooms, 2
I
baths.
don't see one bedrooms as something we would want to separate into a separate category, that's just me. But a studio, I think we could, even in the previous study presented to us a couple of years ago, they maxed it out at 550 square feet.
So we
So
would
even a
move,
little smaller than the average.
we would move the one bedroom to multifamily.
I
or
would just
multi-
leave it as
Yeah,
a
just leave studio,
family.
like no actual
Studio,
room.
just studio, just,
But a studio has to be a certain size or smaller.
Basically a
It
box.
can't be a 2,000 square foot studio.
No
Where somebody's gonna walk in and put up a
additional
I mean,
no additional room inside other than
Right.
the bathroom and the shower, right?
mhm. Does that work? Or,
I think so. I mean, you have to put a size on it,
right,
right? But I agree with Rhonda,
You'd want to lump one bedroom into the multifamily.
I think so too. What would be y'all's suggestion on the size of a studio?
Well, I think Rhonda's sample is as good as any. I mean,
Which is, what was it, Ron?
300 to 600, they said anything under 300 was called a micro unit.
Okay, so 600 or less, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
A studio that's 600 or less
I
pays,
can go, I can go with
$300
that,
whatever that
because that's, you know, because 300 is not, that's the size of a garage.
right? I know, I agree.
That's a 2-car garage.
A motel room is
Or
running
motel room,
about
yeah.
300, 330 square feet, yeah.
But it's, all we need is the maximum, it's not the minimum maximum, right, that we need?
Yeah, the way I understand it, the studio would just be.
600 or less square feet. If they make them 300, that's their business, I mean,
We're not telling them how to do their business.
so when we,
Kind of jumped ahead, Carson, sorry.
no, that's all right. No, thank you very much. So when we look at what the draft maximum fees would be for the short-term rental units, it's going down $748 for single family. It's going up $286 for townhome. It's going down $82 for multifamily, $54 for condo. And then the studio one bedroom is a new category. As you pointed out correctly, the last go round, the studio one bedroom would have been charged the multifamily rate previously, but the new rate would be $131. And then the mobile home, that's the interesting one. The short-term rental number is actually higher by $5,000 than the county-wide fee. But if you look under note 1, that was also the same situation in 2017 with your previous study, where the maximum supportable fee of $12,757 for short-term rental homes, or excuse me, short-term mobile homes was calculated. However, the fee was adopted at the county-wide amount of $76.72.
have any short-term rental mobile homes?
Well, that's one of the things that came up. And it's also important to note, as Rhonda
I would not be happy when I got there.
correctly pointed out during our meetings with the Growth Management Task Force, that everybody sort of lost track of the fact that in order to get these rates, you have to come and get approval from the the school district for those rates. And so it's not like people just say, I'm building short-term rental rates, right? You've got to actually prove it. So that's an important consideration. But the Growth Management Task Force did recommend removing the mobile home category from the short-term rental fee schedule. As someone, I think this gentleman here said, mobile homes are generally not utilized as short-term rentals, so.
The challenge is that you have those large units of mobile homes in that short-term overlay.
Right.
Park, Sherwood Forest, Osceola, and some other places out there in that Devonport area that, they aren't being used as short-term rentals, but they have a lot of kids.
So the other thing I ran into over the last couple of days of doing some research was, do we want to leave the studio 1 bedroom on here as well? I'm thinking most people are not going to come to Central Florida to rent a studio apartment.
Yeah, why don't we do this, why would we not follow the same rationale here? We have maybe you have a studio, but the 1 bedroom's back up with multifamily.
Well, I was thinking.
I would say remove it out.
You're saying remove it altogether?
Remove the one or the studio?
Both of them.
Yeah, but what about a couple, my husband and wife, I'd go down and rent a studio apartment for a short term. And yeah, Airbnb, I mean, it's.
But I'm confused, why short-term rental is even being calculated? If it's a short-term rental, your student's not going to school, are they? Is that what they're assuming?
Well, that's what they want to, that's
What
what
is
they want us
short term, what is
to
a
do.
short term?
But they convert.
But they convert
Over time.
We saw that during the recession.
Right.
That's really where we always thought it, but recession proved it to us. This is unfortunately what families start doing is, they start putting multiple families even into the motel rooms.
Well, if that's the case, then I like the idea of consistency. So if you're doing it in one area, you want to justify it, especially if someone's going to challenge it. I don't want to give them an easy target to hit. Go, why'd you do it here, not there? So I think it's better for a uniform definition to say, okay, 1 bedroom is multifamily, anything less than 600 is, so we don't cherry pick, like I'm using his words, we don't cherry pick when to use it. We're being consistent throughout.
So we want to take the 1 bedroom off of the short-term rental as well that we just did.
And add the less than 600 square feet is what I think I heard the.
Yeah, and add the 600.
But I just want to be clear, we're also removing the 1 bedroom from the countywide.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's going in,
So we're.
it's just part of multifamily.
Right. Okay. Excellent. So, we want to leave you with, there's some discussion topics. A lot of this we've already started touching.
Yeah, where it is. Let's go back to this one.
It's the studio 1 bedroom definition, which we've not had a insufficient conversation on that yet. The hotel motel conversion, somebody brought up as well. I mean, that's a serious consideration, right? And that's gonna happen more and more. In fact, we're told that there's something big that's gonna happen here in Florida shortly on hotel motel conversions. We've already seen a ton of that ourselves in Las Vegas.
You even had a luncheon too, and the county said they want to do it, they're
Yeah.
pushing it down.
Yeah.
We have 4 applications
Yep.
pending.
What's Las Vegas's generation look like with students in the conversions?
Well, in the Las Vegas situation, it's really not generating school kids.
Right.
It's more in the downtown area when, I don't know how much you know about Vegas, but Tony Shea, passed away recently from Zappos. He was fronting $350 million of his own money on that downtown project, and part of it was he was converting all of these vacant or underperforming hotels into what he called crash pads for Zappos employees and the consultants that were coming in, and just the downtown Vegas was becoming like, Williamsburg, Brooklyn, with the hipsters coming downtown that didn't have any kids, but it's a very real phenomenon we're seeing in a lot of urban areas where hotels are converting into, because you're trying to meet affordable housing needs and that sort of thing. Yeah. So also tiny homes, I mean, that's gonna be on the horizon. I was at a funeral a few weeks ago, and my cousin was there, and he's a tiny home expert, and I spent like an hour talking to him about tiny homes, and he's, I mean, it's coming. I mean, everybody's gonna be dealing with it. It's not just a short-term
You'd
thing.
be surprised.
Tiny people.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we don't have a real firm grasp on, much like the
I've got a
studio,
hammer.
is
Prepared for that.
what they generate in terms of school kids, right? It's all over the map. Vacation villas, the classification you have here, housing for older person communities. And then there's also been, and I'm sure you guys have been keeping abreast of this, There've been some changes to the impact fee statute that we just signed in the last week or so. But as part of that, it changes the time between impact fee studies, where your ordinance, I believe, requires 3 years, or it's a policy, I can't remember the
It's been
ordinance.
past practice.
Yeah, so you've been updating every 3 years. The new impact fee statute limits you to every 4 years, so that'll change. Also, one of the key provisions is that you can't increase impact fees over certain percentages, right?
150.
That's not a real issue for you guys, because you guys have been adopting consistently the maximum supportable impact fee maximum supportable impact fee amount. It really is gonna affect jurisdictions that may have said, hey, we're only gonna adopt 40% of the park fee this go round, but now we wanna implement 100% of it, and they're not gonna be able to do that. They're gonna have to phase it in, so that's something.
Can I ask you a question, backing up on the vacation villas and the Hopins, where everybody started carving up these little categories and they were exempt, and we're now seeing student generation out of those. What is your opinion on impact fees for those? Because we're getting in a cat and mouse game now.
Right. Well, I'm not sure how do you guys define a vacation villa now?
Do you have a packet?
Every other home.
No, for each one of these
Right.
categories, we do have a packet, and they have to meet all the criteria in the packet, with the biggest requirement being they have to sign a 30-year covenant and restriction that has to be recorded as well as placed on the plat. So should they start trying to sell them out, no matter how the new homeowner might look for it, it'll definitely come up in a title search that there's all these restrictions that says no students. But again, it's a process, they have to own the land, they have to
Paperwork
be,
means nothing, because some
because
of
now
them
they're starting to
are
violate.
having kids live there. And we then.
So they're violating their covenants.
Right,
Yes.
but then we have to give them notice, and they have X days, so it's, our staff's getting tied down now with me about, okay, now we gotta chase them, what if they don't go out? Who's gonna enforce it, the fees against everybody? Because they're all due if they don't fix it. And, it's just proving that there is a generation.
Do we know how it compares to the vacation villa could be probably any single-family, townhome, or multifamily, right?
Yes. Well, no, typically the villas, they're the ones with the
The answer to the question
concierge
is yes.
answers.
Typically, they're not always.
Yeah, they're typically the more single family, with a common area for all mail delivery, checking in, checking out. Short-term rentals, you pull up in the driveway, it's like your own private home. So that's kind of the big difference. So like the vacation villas, they can't have a garbage delivery at every address, they can't have a mailbox at every address. It's all centralized.
Can't get school transportation.
Right.
When we first saw it, the first group we saw, we kind of said we understood was because of COVID, we had a number of international visitors and they couldn't go back. And it was just stuck. But now we have seen where it's more than that.
Now, was this an issue 2 years ago, or is it recent?
We just allowed these categories
Okay.
in the 2017, so that's what it was. It was a watch and monitor, see if everybody held to their promises. And after about the first year, we started
Yeah,
seeing
last
the
6 months, we
violations.
started to track it.
And the one that really surprised me was the number of violations out of the housing for older person communities. It just shows how many
I was gonna ask you about,
grandparents are.
I was gonna ask you about that, because I don't know if I dreamed this or something, but under the covenants, these age-restricted communities are more commonly known, the 55 and older. Do they have within their deed restrictions or within their, they can allow up to
No,
5%?
no.
You sure?
No kids.
Are you sure? Because the federal, I got my burger license and I remember that was a question.
I
They're
thought-
they're
I
they're
thought
allowed
you-
20%.
Like a percentage is
They're
what I.
allowed 20%, but they're not.
Right, so they're allowed 20% by federal law, to have people under the age of 55. So what we do is we tighten down the 18 and under, and by signing the agreement and doing the covenants and restrictions, they're
You can't have
guaranteeing
18 and under.
that of that 20%, they won't be children. if they want this no impact fee, because
So,
they're literally paying
Under
Yeah, they-
fifty-five, but not under 18?
if they wanna get the no
Yeah, but
impact.
are they even, is that even legal? Because if the federal government says you gotta allow 20% to be restriction, are their covenants allowed to be more
We're
restrictive than
taking
the
the
federal government?
position it is because their 20% can be made of
19 to 54.
19 to 54.
Oh, I see what you're saying, it could
Yeah.
be 54 and under, okay, yeah, 19 to 54.
Is
And
They would be breaking
in
the law.
fact,
If
we
they're
have,
under,
if I remember correctly,
No, but the
We
point that I'm trying to hit to is if they go 19 to 54, those are age fertile.
we made the
Those are
developers
55.
give us,
No, I'm talking about, but they could generate a kid.
remember?
On the one.
Oh,
I mean, theoretically,
that's
not that they
Julius.
do.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're married
The
to a
kid can't live there.
Julius,
That's four.
we took the position, the developers' lawyers generated a legal opinion that said they can do it that way. If that was to be tossed out, then they owe all the impact fees.
Then we would eliminate the
All
category
right, so,
altogether.
but what we are seeing is roughly this semester we saw
I was thinking about the
approximately
fertilization of it, but you're saying that. it actually
38
produces
children
babies.
out of 9 projects and 20 out of 1.
Say that again.
There are 38 students we've identified going to our schools out of a total of 9 projects, but one of those projects represents 20 kids.
And it happens to be next door to us.
Have we provided the notice to?
We have,
her?
we've heard nothing. In fact, I just was talking to Rhonda about that. I said, Rhonda, something's odd, so I'm gonna have delivered to them and signed for a letter this week, because it's really odd. We've not heard from them in response to it. But going back to your thing, it's almost like, I hate to say it, but going forward, if we're gonna keep this, I'd recommend we don't give them the 30-day notice and simply say, take that out of the agreements and say, if any of your neighbors violate it, you're all paying it, the developer, because the next step will be this. Let's assume they don't comply, and we say all the impact fees are due. Arguably, the county's ordinance is the ordinance, and the
Right.
county's got to enforce it. What do we do if they go, we're not
But couldn't you
enforcing?
require a bond?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. How long does it take for them to come in to begin violating normally?
We
Right, like-
started seeing it after about a year,
Wow, that quick.
yeah.
In that case, yeah, I mean,
It's,
I mean, to me, I would either not have the category, and I would think those vacation villas would be lucrative to the owners.
Well,
So
we were kind
charge them
of-
the impact fee,
they would police
or
them.
we have a bond or an escrow that if, you know, if it's violated, then you draw down against the escrow. And after a certain period, if they don't, then they get the escrow back, but a bond's probably the better way.
which they're gonna, how long would you say you keep the bond for?
I mean,
10 years.
I would
yeah, I
say
mean, like when the
10.
county gets a
Understand
bond for a
these res-
subdivision, what do they keep it for?
Oh, well, that, for a road,
Yeah.
well, it's built and everything, so it's just a fixed time. In this case, our agreements are 30-year agreements, right? But they're not gonna agree to pay for a bond for 30 years.
No, but let me, do these things pay school property taxes?
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So if they paid school property taxes for about 10 years, you've got your impact fees. I mean, somebody can do that math,
Yeah, but so does every other house.
huh?
So does
No,
every.
no, I
other
get
So they pay the
that,
impact
but they've not generated anything during that time.
Because they paid nothing.
So really,
Yeah.
you're raising a good issue.
You're getting very nice revenue
I got you.
for a period of
So maybe
time.
you say you have a 10-year bond.
But
Because,
it's the same theory on your impact fees. If you have a house that's there and you tear it down and build another one, you get the credit because that house has paid, you know, sewer and water for 30 years before. So they bought into it over time as opposed to.
We were on the statute.
Next step.
We were on the statute. And then
Oh.
we were done.
I think we're finished. Phase two.
Next, okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I've got one, are we done?
No, we got one more slide.
So the next steps would be to finalize the report based on the feedback we've got from tonight. We are gonna be briefing the St. Cloud Chamber virtually on the morning of June 29th, I believe at 8 o'clock. And then next step would be for take action on the report and then forward on to the Board of County Commissioners for consideration. And at this point, your next board meeting, I believe, would be July 15th, is the earliest you could do that. Or it's gonna be July 13th, and that would be the earliest you could do that.
Is your briefing of St. Cloud gonna be briefing based upon the input tonight?
I don't think so, if there's any changes.
Then, if you revise that, could you make sure our superintendent
Sure.
board has the revised before it goes public, so if they get called?
And then the only thing is, I think we said the feedback, but I want to be more specific, because I know the high school costs have gone up, or construction costs have gone up. Can we use a more recent index to add to that? Is there like a national construction index or something like that?
Yeah, that's the engineering news and record.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is how a lot of impact fee ordinances peg their, you know, if you only update your fees every 5 years, they increase them each year based on whatever, it's like the CPI.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it'll be higher than the 240.
So what I'm hearing that the board wants is for us to re-examine that cost of construction based on current trends, look to make sure that we're making that fair, and not too conservative, but fair, that could be defensible in court, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, because especially the national index is higher than 240, higher than the average. If it's the same, then we don't use it, but.
So then what I would suggest to the board, and this is certainly the board's pleasure, is that we ask Carson to do those adjustments to the calculation in terms of what's reasonable and fair based on his experience and knowledge and work. We bring that back as an information item on July the 13th, get any feedback from the board, and then bring it back for action at our first meeting in August, and then move forward with the commissioners. Does that sound reasonable? That way, we don't want to rush it, but we don't want to drag it out forever. That way, we've had plenty of opportunity for community input. We've been transparent so far, and they've been very appreciative.
Carson, let Robert do your math.
Then the one bedrooms get converted to multifamily and single, the one
We
bedroom
take
by
one
itself.
bedroom off, we
Studio.
have a studio category, not a one bedroom category.
Could I ask that, bringing the 13th, and coming back to the final vote, you and I are going to meet with Don Fisher and his people and tell them exactly what's coming? Because they're gonna have to modify their ordinance.
Correct, they would have to modify
I
the
think if
ordinance.
we give them a heads up, we at least know if we got something.
And the phasing in of impact fees still has to be, any increase has to be done over 2 years, so. Okay.
That's it. We will stand adjourned.